Alrighty. So, since there are no artifacts to look at this week, my proposal is that we talk about the ideas present in our readings and what might work as an artifact, which we could discuss. So my pitch was going to be that since we've got this article from TED actually about how religion is defined and whether it is a construct of kind of modern Western Christianly based theologians, I think an interesting place to look would be into responsa published by rabbis, because presently the topic of who is and is not Jewish and what defines Jewish identity is a really hot button topic all over the world, really, if only because your eligibility for Israeli citizenship is defined by whether or not you are like officially Jewish in a lot of places or for a lot of people. So like if you're looking into, I remember this because I was trying to convert, if you're looking at Reconstruction, which is like was the synagogue I was hanging out with, if you're looking at Reconstruction Judaism, ambilineal lineage is considered legitimate. So it doesn't matter if your mother or your father was Jewish. If you've got a Jewish parent of any gender, you're in. You're part of the club. And their conversion process is, it requires like a year of study and a mikvah, but there's also like a hot debate going on about how to deal with the circumcision requirement. Whether Reform and Reconstruction synagogues require ritual circumcision as part of the conversion process is kind of hot. Whoa! There's a thunderstorm now. Whether circumcision is required is hotly debated, and issues of bodily autonomy are hotly debated, and how transgender people can convert to Judaism when typically their anatomy does not fit the typical anatomy of their like Jewishly prescribed gender role. Like there are Talmudic requirements for men and women that assume things like all men have penises that must be circumcised and women menstruate and have to use a ritual mikvah. So if those things aren't true for you, then how do you go about converting to Judaism and following Jewish law? Oh, it's hailing, geez.
No, my car was out in the parking lot.
Every afternoon in Colorado in summer, where like the heavens open up and all hell breaks, is really disconcerting.
I was gonna say God does not like this topic.
God loves this topic. He wrote a whole book about it.
Yep. So I guess like my question would be of how that would apply to someone who is a trans man that menstruates.
This was my big question.
Yeah.
Because I was going to be a trans man converting in. I was like, pause. How would that work? And the rabbis were like, wouldn't you like to know? Here's 300 pages on the topic.
Nice.
So like, I don't know. I think, we've talked a lot about defining Jewish identity kind of within its own context and its own terms. So I think like an obvious artifact would be like looking at some of the writing that is currently being generated in which Jewish people kind of define what it means to be Jewish. And like I'm much less knowledgeable about Islam, but I'd be interested in that too. Like how do different sects of Islam deal with conversion? And like, because I feel like in the conversion question, like really is the definition of what it means to be of a religion.
Yeah.
So I've got my one of my good friends is leaving the Mormon church and is looking for a new basically a new religion. And what's important for her is being able to raise the kids with the community. It's less about the belief and like, but just that there are like, oh, on Sundays we go to church and then we go to Sunday school. Like she wants the kids to have that sort of structure. And I was trying to tell her, I'm like, well, if you start going to my church, you don't need to like convert or like be rebaptized or anything. You can just go to church and nobody will care. And like theologically, that's not necessarily true, but the actual practice really doesn't line up with the theology that we claim, if that makes sense. But I just think that's really interesting in relation to what does it mean to be Jewish?
Yeah.
And a lot of it's wrapped around the practice, not around the belief.
Yeah.
Anyways, I segue into my idea for artifact. You were talking about what does it mean to be Jewish? I think it'd be fascinating to look at what counts as religion around, like legally,
Yeah.
around the world. Because like in America, it's mainly like a Christian Protestant looking thing. But it's not well defined. And just how do other countries legally deal with the question of what is religion? Is it protected? Is it banned? So like all that. So that's what I would want to look at.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, there's probably legal texts getting into like what the separation of church. Are you hearing thunder over there, see? It's hailing over here, and I'm like suddenly very worried. I left my wife's lemon tree outside to get sunlight. I hope this doesn't kill it.
Oh no.
Do you need to
I
go
left
get it?
my I left my lawn chair outside at home.
I'm not worried about lawn chairs.
I'm also worried about my car because it's currently out in the parking lot.
More concerning to me. There's not very much hail. Like I think the tree will be fine. There's just been like a sprinkling of hailstones and what's mostly rain. But I'm
Okay.
also thinking that if it's going to keep doing this every afternoon, I should probably bring the tree in because it doesn't like this much water.
Yeah.
I'm a bad plant sitter. Anyway. Well, sweet. That's 2 pitched artifacts, both about the Vial article. See, you got any ideas for either this one or the one about queer theory? What that is? It's also a hotly debated topic.
It is very debated. I'm trying to think.
That's fine. I don't mean to drag you into it. Like, honestly, being a little millennial twerp that I am, if I was like, let's pick an artifact to talk about kind of the state of queer discourse in academia, I'm like, I know at least 4 YouTubers that have really good takes on this. Like, I feel like a lot of the voice of at least the up and coming generation of queer people is found in like video essays on YouTube or honestly nowadays TikTok channels. So I'm like, we should follow the discourse where it goes. Let's have a TikTok artifact.
I feel like academia is too restricted, and it doesn't allow for enough people who are living the experience to weigh in.
Right. Or rather, when there is like a really lively discussion going on, it takes like 10 years for it to be documented in academia, so it completely misses the boat.
Yeah.
Like
academia is
academia
just
is
getting on to like the True Scum versus 2Q debacle of the early 2000s or the early 2010s, and I'm like, we're over this now, gang. We've moved on to whole different nonsense.
Yeah. I think the issue is that like academia is built on a structure of colonization and thus continues that like basically legacy of colonization and oppression, as well as basically harming marginalized communities, that including the queer community.
Yeah. So I'm very distracted by the thunder.
Same.
You can send it my way. We have got I went outside yesterday and my car was yellow, covered in pollen. We could use a good rainstorm.
I'll do my best to consult with the thunder god, but he's not known to take orders.
Nicely. Make a sacrifice. Come on. Chop chop.
Yes, as if I don't do that every day. Come on. See my altar back there. Right.
So
No, literally, I like already got a little cup full of black coffee and an acorn, and like I already make ritual offerings to the thunder god. He doesn't take orders. Yes, well, I mean, I actually totally agree that I think in a lot of ways when talking about the experiences of people who are traditionally not included in the academy, having academic discourse about them is kind of a doomed endeavor.
Yeah.
Which I do think is increasingly acknowledged by academics. I think, I don't know, usually nowadays if I read a paper about when I read a paper about the experience or ontology of a marginalized people, the author will always start by either saying, I am a part of this group and I speak from experience, or I'm not a part of this group, so I'm going to do my best, but honestly, don't listen to me.
Positionality statements.
Exactly. It's kind of a disclaimer up front.
Yeah. I know it's a little over a year ago, I read a book called Academic Ableism, and it's just like entirely on ableism in academia.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, obviously, hence the title. But it was like my way of intellectualizing some of my feelings that I was experiencing at DU because I had some very classist and ableist barriers regarding accommodations.
Yeah.
I'm
sorry.
But like those are structures that are also built out of colonization, but also just like failings in academia that just fail to acknowledge those kinds of gaps in their culture.
This is my biggest frustration has always been academia, especially K-12 school, is all about grades. It has they don't care if you learn anything. It's just about how you appear to perform in comparison to your peers. And I'm like, that has nothing to do with learning.
Yeah.
Really.
And it's just, I don't know. I feel like at least at ILIF, I've been very lucky that my teachers have understood that I want to learn and I could care less about my grades. But in undergrad, I'd be like, oh, well, I didn't do great on this paper, but I learned something. They're like, well, you need to do better next time. Like, I need to learn more next time. Like, that's the whole reason I'm here, is to fail and try again. I don't know. So yeah, academia is, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am 7 days away from being free of it.
Honestly, I've had a very opposite experience, especially in undergrad, where just like my head does work in a way that's very compatible with what most colleges are looking for. So one time, I probably shouldn't admit this in a recording, but to hell with it. I took a literature class in undergrad in which I never read a single one of the readings we were assigned in a literature class, and I got an A because I was really good at making up paper topics that sounded like literary theory and criticism.
See, this is what bothers me.
Like, it's totally possible to pass with flying colors in a class where you do none of the work and receive none of the and take nothing in.
Yeah. Like,
Honestly,
that's
this is a waste of it's a huge waste of my resources. I just, I was 20 and exhausted, and I was like, I just need 4 more credits, so I didn't care. But in hindsight, I'm like, I spent like cumulatively probably about $8,000 to read nothing and fake my way through a couple of discussions, and that was not a good use of my resources.
And like all you got at the end of it was a piece of paper saying you're educated.
Yeah.
Like, and it's exactly C's point. That is most ableist. It's just
yeah, no, it's just the metrics in place to judge. First of all, it's a bizarre thing to do, to judge where learning has taken place. I mean, surely that would be the business of the one trying to learn.
But how they know they haven't learned yet?
Right. And like, second of all, like in practice, the way at least my institutions historically have gone about grading is much less about rewarding effort and learning and growth, and much more about rewarding like neurotypicalness.
Like turning things in on time.
Yeah, it's like we're
I'm
gonna grade
terrible
you
at that.
on your executive function and like ability to generate a particular tone of voice at will.
I don't think I've turned anything in on time this year.
Same.
I like iLive. I'm thriving here. I actually do the readings here because I like them.
Right? I do them because I know it, even if I'm late, they're worth it. Does that make sense? Like the readings are not just assigned to fill up space. And I know that there is space for me to continue learning past the imposed deadline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, I do feel like there's a slight advantage in almost all of our professors being ordained clergy. I think that's a group of people who are abnormally trained to do things like value human beings and their growth and well-being.
I don't know if any of my professors I've had in the past year have been ordained.
Oh, well, many of mine have.
Yeah. That's
Nice.
MTS versus MDiv, I guess. That's
That would do it, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of my professors have been ordained people who like spent careers working in religion and like including parts of like spiritual care. So I'm like, yeah, these people would be, I think, fairly well equipped to do things like care about their students' well-being.
I also think that being in a field where you have to grapple with what it means to be human on multiple levels just forces people to grapple with what does it mean to be a kind human?
Yeah.
Are my students going to do better if I'm a strict person who says, oh, zeros after deadline? Like, no.
Well, yeah, and like since we're going into like the field of religion, I think it's important to figure out like what is important in that field. Like, is this a field about executive function and turning stuff in on time, or is this a field about deep reflection about the human condition and whether or not God plays a role in our lives?
Yeah.
Which I just think are different skill sets.
Yeah.
Like I had an epiphany about religion and the whole bit with Glickle, and religion wasn't a thing with Glickle.
Hmm.
And I thought I had fully understood this, but I was having trouble kind of articulating like, but Glickle does all these religious things. Like how is there no religion? And it clicked. This is a week after our original paper was due. It clicked. I was like, oh, it's like leisure time. How leisure time wasn't a thing until it was differentiated out. It's like, this has been like a year of me thinking I understood, not really understanding. And if I hadn't given myself the space to just ponder this and I've just written the essay, I never would have figured it out.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. Anyways, do we have anything else to say?
And I think we've done good for an artifact discussion with no artifacts. Do you guys agree?
I think so.
If you want to stop it, and then we can maybe chat about papers.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a thing.
All right, and cut.